Hello everyone and welcome to Hamwell Zoo. Thank you so much for joining us again. Today we are with our fabulous flock of chickens. We've got 21 chickens here at the zoo. Within the flock there are 3 cockerels and 18 hens. And today I am going to feed them their absolute favourite, these lovely, lovely, lovely mealworms. And as you can see, they're really, really eager to have a lovely treat. If you've got any questions about the chickens, pop them in the comments below and we'll try to get through as many as possible. Today, to stick along with the curriculum, we thought we would talk about life cycles. So each animal, including humans, have a life cycle, and that's something that happens when you're first conceived, so when you're first created, and it can travel all the way through your life until death. So the chicken's life cycle, once a pair have mated, one of the female hens, she will lay an egg, and I've brought you some of our eggs to show you. Here are our eggs, and we get lots and lots of different colour eggs. We get red eggs and brown eggs and beige eggs and white eggs and cream eggs and green eggs and blue eggs. We get lots and lots of different colours from our flock. And then what the female hen will do is she would sit on her egg for 21 days to keep it nice and warm. And we call that period an incubation period because she's keeping it nice and warm for 21 days. And after 21 days, a little chick will hatch and the hen will look after that chick. And while the chick is still very young, we call it a chick. And then when it grows a little bit older, the chick will start to grow all of these lovely feathers. And after about a year, if the chick is a male, so a cockerel, they might father some more chicks. Or if the chicken becomes a hen, a female, it will then, whoop, there we go. She'll then start laying eggs. And if she's with a male, she might have chicks of her own. And that's their life cycle until they get to around about 10 years old. It depends on the different breeds, but around about 10 years old is how long chickens will live for. Some a little shorter, some a little bit longer. In our flock, it's quite a young flock at the moment, but the eldest one is Princess, who's over there, and he's 9 at the moment. And the youngest, as you might know from the first lockdown, if you didn't see it, we did a whole month's project looking at an egg hatching. So it's still on our Facebook. So if you search in our photo albums, you'll see our chicken egg incubation project. Hello, and as if by cue, and I can tell by their orange, sorry about that, I can tell by their orange ring that this, in the incubation project we hatched an egg, and if you followed it, you'd know that we all decided to name the chicken Lockie. And Lockie, where have we gone? Oh no, there he is. Lockie is just behind me there. He's the white cockerel just there. And he's nearly a year old now. He's about 10 months old from then. So if you didn't see that project, it's a really interesting project because we looked inside the egg and what was going on during incubation, and we followed Lockie's development throughout incubation and also throughout his adolescence. And now, as you can see, he's a really big, strong male who's having an argument with Lavender here. I don't know what the argument's over, but I'll give him some worms anyway. There you go, Lockie. So if you've got any questions, pop them down in the comments below. As a bit of homework, if you're interested into looking into life cycles, I would always suggest butterflies and frogs. They're a really, really interesting life cycle to go through. And also, I would look at apple trees too. I think apple trees have a really, really interesting life cycle. If anybody wants any help with resources or how to teach life cycles or questions that you might have about life cycles, pop all those questions in the comments below, and I'll look at them later this evening and help where I can. So for now, hopefully you can hear me because we're being a bit noisy in the hen house. I'm going to hand over to Jim and ask if there are any questions at the moment.
When do they start looking different than boys and the girls?
That really, really depends on the breed. So usually, if they're born quite early on in the year, usually within that year, you could see any tropes, any differences in the genders if that breed has those differences. So, one main difference is that the boys, the cockerels, make that really famous cock-a-doodle-doo sound, and they can usually, especially Lockie, they usually make that sound quite early on, so that can tell you whether they're a male or a female. To control the flock, we normally blood test the eggs, and that tells us whether the chick's going to be a male or a female, so we can tell from day one, from when they hatch. But early on, within that same year, the boys will start to crow, and if that particular breed has the long comb, and the comb is this red fleshy part on the tops of their heads that's full of blood, usually in most breeds the boys have a really large comb, but it'd be difficult to see here, but especially this white leghorn here, she's probably got the longest comb in the flock. It hangs right down over her face, but she's a girl, so you can't always tell that way. One way that we can usually tell, and hopefully you'll be able to see from here, is that girls have straight tails and boys have curly tails. So if you look, hopefully you'll be able to see some of them here. At the front you can see all of these girls, they all have straight tails that stand straight up, and then the boys, if you look at Lockie's tail, he's got longer feathers that then curl over. So if you're not sure, if they don't crow, if they don't cock-a-doodle-doo, or if they haven't laid eggs yet, or if you're not sure if the breed if the male or female for that breed has a long comb or not, you can usually tell by their tail feathers. The boys would be nice and curly, and the girls would be lovely and straight.
Right, Jessica and Lily are asking, which is the eldest and how many chickens are there?
Hello Jessica and Lily. The eldest is Princess, who is 9 years old. He's a cockerel just over there. Do you want to have a swing over and see if you can... Okay, I don't think he's going to come over. He's he doesn't much like the crowds, but he's the eldest. He's not in a separate paddock. He's in the same paddock, but we halve the paddock in the centre to make it easier to control the birds. He's our eldest at 9, and in the entire flock we've got 21 birds. 3 of them are males, so we call them cockerels, and 18 of them are females, so we call those hens.
And Steve is asking, how do you know when the egg is ready to hatch?
Hello Steve. Well, when chickens hatch within by 21 days, sometimes they can be a day early or a day late, but normally they're pretty predictable on that day 21. But by day 18, throughout the whole process, we'll do something called candling, which is we shine a bright light through the egg, through the base of the egg, and the base is the wide bit and the top is the pointy bit. At the base we shine a bright light, and for most of that 21-day period we can see what's going on. But there is an air cell at the wide bit. You might notice it when you hard boil an egg and you open it up. You might notice the actual egg that comes out isn't that entire egg shape. They've got a little gap at the base, and that's where the air cellars, that's where the embryo passes gas over, so it gets rid of carbon dioxide and can absorb some oxygen. But also by about day 20, the chick would have orientated itself to face that air cell. It will poke a hole inside the air cell and start to take its first breath before it hatches out of the shell in itself. Then it will make a tiny crack called a pip, and we know that once it's made that pip, within 24 hours the chick would have hatched. So there's lots of different ways we can tell, but mainly by shining a light through or by timing it from when it was first incubated, and that's how we can tell the chick's about to hatch. So thank you for that question, Stephen.
That was from Esther, that one.
Esther, sorry.
And do they make good pets?
That's such a tricky question. With most, as a zoo, our biggest concern, our most paramount concern, is conservation. So we really put weight towards conserving species and making sure they're looked after properly, especially in the wild. Chickens, of course, are domestic animals, so they wouldn't exist without people anyhow. When it comes to pets, Pets should really be given a lot of thought over. So if you're going to get a pet, you need to do a lot of research to make sure you can give everything, to give that animal everything that they'll need. With chickens, it depends on what kind of pet you're looking for, but chickens are relatively, compared to other animals, especially other animals within the zoo, they're relatively easy to look after. They've got wonderful characters. I think out of all the animals in the zoo, I always say I don't have favourites, but if I was forced to ask, if someone forced me to tell what my favourite might be, it would probably be the chickens, just because they've got so much character. And of course, if you eat eggs, that you have to be really careful. So our chicken eggs don't go into the food chain because we don't keep them to food standards, because that involves different vaccinations and whatnot. So they're not registered as food animals, so we don't eat their eggs. But of course, having chickens can be really rewarding. If someone were to have any pet, I would always suggest adopting and not buying. So with chickens, there are lots and lots of egg-laying hens that are always up for adoption. So if that's something that you would like, and that's something you've really thought about and you've really researched, thinking about all of their needs, they need to be looked after every single day. They need lots of space to roam around. They need a specialised diet. Not only would I not suggest you feed them on kitchen scraps, it's also quite surprisingly against the law to feed them on kitchen scraps. You're not even allowed to prepare chickens' food in the same kitchen as you prepare humans' food. So there's lots and lots of things to factor in when you think about getting a pet. But if you take all that into account and you decide that chickens are the right fit for you, then I would always implore you to adopt them, because there's plenty of chickens that always need adoption.
Alicia's got a good question. She's saying, when the chickens lay the eggs, do you let them hatch them, or do we use them elsewhere around the zoo?
That's a really good question, Alicia. As a rule, we never let the hens hatch their own eggs. And the main reason is, if we did, we would have to protect the entire flock from things like foxes and kestrels and magpies and crows. Lots of different animals think that eggs and baby chicks are really tasty. So if we did that, we wouldn't be able to give the chickens a lot of space. Also, chickens, because humans have... Thank you. Because humans have bred them in a certain way to produce lots and lots of eggs, a lot of our hens don't have a strong maternal instinct, which means that they don't really want to sitch on their eggs. So for that reason, we always remove the eggs. None of the eggs go to waste. Like I said, they don't go into the human food chain, but we've got lots of resident animals here, such as the mongoose and the meerkats and some of the other birds who really love eggs, and the armadillo, who's a newer addition. The armadillo really finds those eggs tasty, so we always boil the eggs up for them and feed them to the animals that like them. When our flock gets to a certain age, like I said, our flock is quite a young flock at the moment. So last year we just bred Lockie and a couple of others, and this year we're probably only going to breed one or two, but we do that artificially in our incubation room. And that means we've got special machines called incubators where we keep the eggs warm, we keep them nice and humid, and we keep them rocking from side to side to make sure that embryo inside that egg develops properly. And after 20 days we stop it rocking. The next day they hatch. We look after them for a few months in our nursery, and then they come and join the flock. So that's what happens with our eggs here at Hanwell Zoo.
And Alicia was asking, talking about incubation, can you tell if it's going to be a boy chicken or a girl chicken before they hatch?
Traditionally you can't, because there's nothing that would otherwise indicate what's in the egg visually. But what we do is we take a small blood sample from the embryo inside their egg, and we send that off to a laboratory, and they test that blood sample's DNA, and that DNA will tell you whether it's going to be a female or a male. So we normally do that by about day 7 or 8. Then we send those off the laboratory. The laboratory sends the results back within a week. So by about day 15, we know which eggs are going to produce a male and which eggs are going to produce a female. So then we've got a week then to prepare where those males and females are going to go. So we can tell, but we can only tell by taking a small blood sample from the egg itself.
Lovely. Vedika's asking, why do you rock the eggs when you're incubating them?
Oh, that's a super question, Vedika. So that's something that birds and reptiles, some reptiles, do naturally. They'll rock the egg from side to side within the nest, constantly keeping it moving. And that's because the embryo obviously is chicken shaped, but the egg obviously is egg shaped, and it's got this really strong hard curve on the top. So the embryo will always float to the top, so it'll always be slightly curved. What you don't want to happen is you don't want anything to stick, you don't want the embryo to be uncomfortable, and by not rocking it, it might not develop properly. So we have to rock it. We normally rock it 180 degrees to one side and then 180 degrees to the other side every 30 minutes, and that helps the embryo develop. The embryo also, just to be really, really technical, the embryo has to be on its left-hand side, and sometimes that rocking can help position the embryo properly. I've never seen one on its right-hand side, but if it is on its right-hand side, it just won't develop. So we have to emulate exactly what the mother hen does naturally to be able to be successful in the incubation room. So we keep it warm, we keep the humidity right, we make sure it's moving, we make sure it's nice and clean, and we give it all the love and attention that is required to make a lovely new chick.
Rosabel's asking, could you point out some of the individual chickens with their names, please?
Yeah, sure. That's my favourite thing. I love that question. This is, can you see this one? The ginger one?
Hold up.
The large ginger one at the front, she's a buff Orpington. She's a female and her name is Jacqueline. We all know Lockie, he is a leghorn. This is Tegan, and she is an Araucana hybrid, so she's a mix of 2 different kinds of Araucana. Princess, who we saw shortly before, is a frizzled bantam. Who we got here? This is Yoke, and Yoke, we've got a few of her breed. She is a French copper Moran, and she lays these beautiful, beautiful red eggs. And we've got a few more copper Morans. So we've got Yoke, we've got Red, we've got Mischief, and you can understand why we call Mischief. And we also have Shell, who must be in the shed. She's not here. But there's 4 French copper Morans. Lavender here is a lavender Araucana, and he's a male. Who else have we got? We've got Emily, who, along with Princess actually, Emily was born the same year as Princess, so they're both 9, and Emily is a lavender bantam. These 3 here, they don't have names, and they were born last year with Lockie, and we didn't name them, so they've got coloured rings on their legs so we can tell them apart, and on our records they're called 1, 2 and 3. So if you've got any ideas of what 1, 2 and 3 might want to be called, because they don't yet have a name, we like to keep the names interesting, and it might tell you something about the bird. So for example, Lavender is a lavender bantam. We don't always strongly stick to that rule with the chickens because there's so many, but if you could give a really educational name for 1, 2 and 3, it doesn't have to be gender specific, but they are all female, and they're all a breed called Leghorns. Who else? Who haven't I mentioned? I've mentioned, oh, Shelley. Shelley's here. I must have missed you. Oh, and David. Again, we don't stick to gender names at all. It just doesn't interest us here at Hamwell Zoo. We try to keep it as educational as possible. Sometimes, especially with the chickens, because there's so many, it's difficult to come up with so many, so we just give them names that remind us of that bird. So, for example, Princess was incubated accidentally. She came in from another zoo with a batch of duck eggs that we incubated, and some of the species we weren't quite sure which were which because they were collected from a large lake. And somehow a chicken egg got caught up, and that's where Princess came in. So Princess was reared alone for a while, and he behaved in a certain kind of way. So that's how he got his name. Who else was I going to say? Oh, I know. I tell you who I'll show you. I'll show you. This is Pigeon. Pigeon is one of the cutest and one of the smallest chickens we have. He is a Sarama, a Japanese Sarama, and he's full of character. I was going to mention, and we all, so there's Princess. I was going to mention, David. Where's David gone? David's gone. But David has his name, got his name from, he was used in a David Attenborough program, so that's why we called her David. David is a girl. It's a bit confusing.
Ella's got a good question. She would like to know, when she's having an egg, is she eating baby chickens?
That is a good question, and quite simply, no. Because you always have to have a male and a female to get a baby chicken. When we buy eggs from the supermarket, they will usually just keep female eggs, female hens together with no male chickens. So what that means is, if we didn't eat that egg would never hatch into a baby chick. You have to have a male there. So the eggs that we buy from the shop would not have a baby chick inside. It will just be a simple egg. They have to have the male along with it. And if there isn't a male present, hens will still carry on laying lots and lots of eggs otherwise. So when you're eating an egg, as long as a male hasn't been present, which usually with the eggs that we buy in the supermarket they're not, then you won't be eating a baby chicken.
Lovely. And I think finally Esther was asking, do different types of chickens come out of different coloured eggs?
Yes. Yes, they do. So it kind of like how we can tell the difference between males and females. It really depends on the very specific breeds, on what colour eggs they lay. So sometimes you can tell by the colour of their ears. I won't be able to show you here, but if you Google chicken ears, there's just like a really fleshy bit on the side of their faces. And as a general rule, but there's always exceptions, and there's certainly exceptions in this flock, if their ears are red, they will have a reddish, browny, fleshy sort of colour egg. If their ears are white, they'll lay a white egg, and if their ears are blue, they'll lay a bluey, greeny egg. That's a general rule, and it does work for some of the birds here. So our leghorns all have white ears, and they all lay these lovely white eggs. And some of the Aracanas have blue ears, and they lay blue eggs. But this one, our lavender Aracana, she has red ears, but she still lays white eggs. So the rule doesn't always work. But with the copper morans, they have red ears, and they lay red eggs, but they're really deep chestnut browny sort of red. So when we see those eggs, we know that they've come from one of the female French copper morans. But unless we segregate them, unless we separate them, because we've got three males, we don't always know who the father is. Usually when we want, with breeds, we don't aim for a specific breed. We just always aim, when we're breeding our chickens, we always aim for an unrelated mother and father. So that's how we'll breed our birds. So we know who laid the eggs, but because the males are all different breeds, we're never quite sure whether a hybrid is going to come out or a full breed or whatnot. But the colour of the egg can tell you a lot about who laid it and who might be inside. Super, thank you so much all for your wonderful, wonderful questions. We apologise if we didn't get to your questions, but I will answer them tonight. So if you do still have questions, today's the 27th of January. If you write them before 6 p.m. tonight, I'll answer all of them. If anybody wants any help with teaching life cycles in line with the national curriculum, especially for key stages 1 and 2. We have some resources we can share, and we can certainly point you in the right direction and answer any questions you might have on that. Thank you all so much for joining us again. Join us again next week, where we'll be looking at a very different animal and a very different part of the curriculum. Until next time, goodbye from me and Jim and everybody at Hamwell Zoo, and stay as safe as you possibly can. Bye-bye, everyone.